In this video, we'll talk about the user interface of Maya. Up top, we have menu bar. Now, unlike all the other softwares, Maya's menu bar is slightly different in two ways. Number one, it cannot show all the menu items at the same time because there are a lot of menus. So what we have is we have menu sets. The first 7 menus are going to be common and same at all times. That is File, Edit, Create, Select, Modify, Display, and Windows, and also the last Help menu. And all the other menus will change depending on what kind of work we are doing. Currently, we have selected modeling as the kind of work that we are doing, so that we will find all the modeling related menu bars. If I change this to rigging, it will show me menus that are related to rigging. If I change to animation, it will show me menus that are related to animation, and so on and so forth. The second thing is, if I open a menu, I can not only access the content inside, I can also tear this menu off. So if I want to use, let's say for example, I want to use combine feature so many times, every time instead of going to the menu and choosing it, I can just tear this menu and keep it to the side. So instead of just going to the menu and choosing an option, we can simply click directly from here. We can also do it for a sub menu, for example, so that if I want to do an union operation, every time I don't have to go to mesh and then choose Boolean and then choose union. Instead, I can just simply click here. Now notice that even if I close the mesh menu, the Booleans menu still stays there. We can do this for any number of menu bars. So if I want to have a lot of menu bars floating, I can also do that. And I can also do it for any submenus. Let's go through all the other user interface elements one by one. Let's go to Display, UI Elements, and here are all the user interface elements. We can either enable them or disable them. I'll just tear off this menu so that we can talk about one by one. I can also choose Hide all UI elements, that means all the UI elements disappear, or show all of them. I'm going to hide all of them and then we'll talk about one by one. First, we have status line. So status line basically has some status information. So for example, it shows us which kind of menu set we have selected, which basically tells us what kind of work we are doing. We also have some quick access buttons like save, open, and new. We have undo and redo buttons. We have some rendering buttons here. And apart from that, we have some status information here that shows which mode we are in. So for example, this is an object mode and this is a component mode. Don't get too much confused. When we get into the other videos, you will better understand what each of those status will do. Next to the status line, we have shelf. Now we can compare Maya's shelf to a regular bookshelf where we will have different rows which has got different kinds of books in each of the rows. So here we have different tabs, just like different rows of shelf, and each of those tabs will have their corresponding tools. So for example, here we have curves and surfaces, so we will have all kinds of curves and surfaces tools like creating sphere, creating cube, and so on and so forth. And if I go inside polygons, I will have all the polygon primitives and some polygon modeling tools. If I get into sculpting, it has got the sculpting tools, rigging, and so on and so forth. Now we can also create our custom shelf just by going to a certain menu item. Let's say if I want to add the set key to my custom shelf, all I have to do is press Control and Shift and click on it so that that menu item is being added here. I can also do that for any other menu set I want. So for example, this time I can go to Playback, press Shift and Control and click on it so that you can see that that gets added here. If you want to remove a shelf item, all you have to do is right click on it and choose delete. So that will remove that shelf item. Next to shelf, we have our time slider. Time slider is basically the heart of animation. So if we want to create animation, we will need the time slider, which actually shows these numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. This is just the number of frames. So if you want to create an animation for 1 second, then we will have to have keyframes for 24 frames. If you want to control how many frames you want to show in your timeline, that's when we use the range slider. So that is the next UI element. So if I click on that, this shows us the range slider from which we can choose what should be the range of my time slider. So now it shows starting from 1 frame till 120 frames. So that's what we have here. So if I want to increase the number of frames here, all I have to do is just click here and drag, so that you can see that now we have more number of frames. So I can push it all the way to 200. So now we have frames from 1 till 200. I can also enter a manual value here. Let's say I want to have from frame number 50 till frame number 150. So now you can see that the range that we have selected is 50 frames till 150 frames, so that you will find that same range here in our timeline. So that is from 50 to 150. And we also have some playback controls here, like for playing in reverse, going to the next keyframe, previous keyframe, next frame, previous frame, go to the end and go to the beginning, and so on and so forth. We also have some animation layers, character sets, and things like that. When we get into animation part, we'll talk more in detail. Next to our range slider, we have command line. Command line helps us to enter or input manual commands. We can enter commands in either Mel or in Python. Just for demonstration, if I just type in sphere with Mel and I press enter, it basically creates a NURBS sphere. The right side of the command line is for showing results. So if it is a positive result, or maybe there's an error message or something like that, it would show the last one line of that here, so that if you want to check if there's an error in your file or something like that, then it would show up here. Next to the command line, we have Helpline. Helpline is basically a single line which is non-editable, and it just shows us some information related to the kind of work that we are doing. So for example, by default, it shows us which tool I have selected, and it just gives us small information saying that select an object. So that's just the thing that we can do with the help of the selection tool. And depending on where I am on my screen, it will also give us information. If I click on this, it's going to toggle the attribute editor on or off. If I move here, it shows me that I can toggle tool settings on and off, and so on and so forth. So it basically gives us some information, and depending on what kind of work we are doing, the information would change. So next is Toolbox. The Toolbox is divided into two areas. The upper area has got the tools, and the lower area has got some viewport layouts. So we have the selection tool, we have laser selection tool, we have a paint selection tool, move tool, rotate tool, and scale tool. So depending on what kind of action we're doing, we can choose the kind of tool that we want. And this area shows different kinds of layouts for our viewport. So by default, it shows us a single view, which is perspective for us, and we can also choose a 4-view. We can choose a view layout with a perspective and the outliner. So we'll talk about these things more when we get into other videos. So next to Toolbox, we have Attribute Editor. Attribute Editor basically looks empty right now because we don't have any objects in our scene. So let me quickly create a simple primitive just to show some content. So Attribute Editor basically shows all the attributes that are connected to that particular object. So we can change all kinds of properties that are connected to this object. Let me hide Attribute Editor. I'll show you the tool settings. Tool settings contents changes depending on what kind of tool we are using. So if you have a move tool, then it'll show you different options. If you have rotate tool, it'll show you different options, and if you have scale tool, it just changes depending on what kind of tool we are using. We can change all those settings, and so on and so forth. Next to tool settings, we have our channel box and layer editor. Now this basically has two things. One is our channel box up here and our layer editor down here. So I'll just push this layer editor down to see our channel box bigger. Now channel box basically has all the animatable attributes of the object that we have selected. So what do I mean by that? Attribute Editor has got every single attribute of that object, and Channel Box has got only the animatable attributes of that object. So any attribute that you see in the channel box can be animated. Attribute Editor will have more including the ones that we have in our channel box. So from attribute editor, you can still animate some of most of them, but whatever attribute you're seeing in the channel box, you can animate all of them. Now, below the channel box, we have our layer editor. We've got three kinds of layer editors. One is for display layers, the other one is for render layers, and for animation layers. So for example, if you have a scenery where you've got a lot of background elements like mountains and clouds and stuff, you can put all of them into one layer. And if you have a river or small trees that are in one place, you can put all of them into a separate layer so that we can hide them and show them, which makes the process of working with our scene more easier. I hope this gives you a little understanding of the user interface elements of Maya, and when we get into other videos, you will better understand how to use all these things into your project.